Welcome to Unfeigned Christianity, where we are reconciling our human experiences with God and His Word so that we can love from a pure heart, a good conscience, and sincere faith. I'm excited to have my friend Luci Kinsinger on the show today. Luci recently wrote a book that's kind of a classic example of reconciling our human experiences with God and His Word. It's called Turtle Heart. It tells the story of a relationship she had with an older lady who has since passed on. But this lady broke some of her stereotypes of how she thought about what a Christian was, what it meant to have faith in Jesus, how she thought about people who identified as gay or lesbian, and what it looks like to invest in relationships from a gospel perspective. We'll get into all that more. This book has been about 5 or 6 years in the making. I remember when she first sent it to me back in 2016, I think, the manuscript. So it's exciting to see it come to life, and I'm honored to be able to share this interview with you all. All right, here we are with Luci Kinsinger. I guess I forgot to ask you, do you prefer to go by Luci or Lucinda?
I prefer Lucy for
Luci,
just
okay.
normal conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Unfeigned Christianity.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
It's good to finally have you on. You think you reached out in September or October of this past year. Is that when the book came out?
The book actually came out the very tail end of August.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, but I had just, we had it, Ivan and I had our first daughter, not long before the book came out. So I was kind of like, a lot of things were happening at once. So it was maybe a little bit after the book came out before I actually started reaching out and thinking about people that I could talk about Turtle Heart with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for reaching out. I felt bad because I have uh, pretty much all of 2021. I was off with the podcast. I wasn't really doing much with the podcast and started to try to plan for starting it back up this fall. But then the way some of our schedule went and stuff, I just kicked the can down to the new year. And so
Mm.
it's kind of felt like I've had you on the string here for a while, and you keep checking in, making sure it happens, and I'm grateful for that. Now we finally have you on.
Yeah.
The the uh the book is Turtle Heart for anybody who, I mean, get it right for those watching here. Um and it's a book. The events happen. It's about a relationship you had with a lady back in 2011, kind of around that time. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would have been
Yeah.
that's when I met Charlene. Yes.
And then you started writing about it. I remember you sent the transcript to me back in 2015, 2016, around then. And so that, I'm assuming by then that was kind of the completion of the transcript, and it's been in the process of getting published ever since. Is that kind of how it's?
Yeah, well, the manuscript that I sent to you was an I don't remember. I think it was a well-developed manuscript, but it has definitely gone through significant
Yeah.
edits since then. It's gone through several major edits since that time. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
definitely been a process getting it finished and published because I've done many drafts of this book.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. I, as I was reading it this time, I found myself, like, it's a very easy read. You kind of go flow from one chapter into the next. I don't remember that when I read it the first time, but I was trying to figure out, like, I really struggle to read manuscripts that are just a Word document, unless it's my own, like, unless it's something that I'm writing and I kind of know the story. And just having a hard copy book in my hand may have been the difference. Um, but maybe it's the process of editing and just continuing to improve the manuscript. I I know what it's like. I think my book took like 3 or 4 years till it was till it was finally published. And somewhere in there, I think at the beginning, actually, I had read from another author who said most books go through 8 different manuscripts, 8 different versions of the manuscripts. And I was like, oh no, really? Surely you
Yeah.
can do it faster than that. But is that, do you find that to be true? You've written what, 3 books now, I think? That
Yeah. I didn't count, but yeah, I would say that's definitely it's anything but simple. I don't know if there were 8 versions of anything but simple, but it did go through a lot of edits as well. But definitely, probably my children's books and Turtle Heart have, I would say, probably, definitely.
yeah, yeah, a lot of revision and editing processing. Well, we'll get into the book a little bit further, but just by way of further introduction and so forth, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You are originally from Ladysmith, Wisconsin, which is the area my dad grew up in, actually. So I have, I guess, ties to the Sheldon, Wisconsin, Ladysmith area, but I actually do not know that much about that area of Wisconsin because we've never lived there and only have visited various times and the last 12 years been out here in California. So yeah, is that right? You're from Ladysmith originally, or that
Yes,
area
yes, that's
of
right. Yes.
yeah, go ahead and tell us more about yourself. You are a writer.
Yeah, I'm blog and have written several books, and I love writing.
Yeah.
I've been a writer for a long time. I mean, from a young age, that was, I guess, my dream and goal was to pursue writing because I've always been a reader. I've loved when I was a little girl.
Mm,
That's all I did. I just, pretty much 24/7, I was reading. um, so yeah, I grew up in Russ County, Wisconsin, which Ladysmith was about 15 minutes from my place, which is a pretty rural area. And not a lot there, pretty just fields, some farms, some country people. So
yeah.
very, very different than Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even I not most of my life anymore, most, but half my life was lived in northern Minnesota, and
Okay.
that's really different from Los Angeles, obviously too. But
Yeah, Russ County would not be such a stretch from northern Minnesota.
yeah,
There'd be some similarities definitely there.
probably a little more farmland. A lot of does it tend to be farmland?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot of dairy farms, a lot of small farms that are having a hard time making it now. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, just to jump ahead to current day a little bit because there's more I want to come back to kind of your growing up and experience um as it relates to the book, but you are now living, you're married now 2 years, 3 years you've been married?
2 years.
2 years,
And
okay.
I live in Western Maryland. It's the triangle, like Maryland has this handle, it looks like a panhandle or something. And
Yeah,
very
yeah.
end, the very triangle end of Maryland is where I live. So we're like 15 minutes from West Virginia, about 45 minutes south of Pennsylvania.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Very good. We were just through that little triangle earlier this summer,
oh, really?
passing
Okay.
through. It was the middle of the night. I was driving through there.
Okay. Oh, well, then you missed all the best part.
Yeah, well, actually, we got a hotel. I can't remember what town it was, but we were coming up from Virginia, kind of Catlet, Virginia area, and
Okay.
heading to Ohio. And we went up through there, got a hotel somewhere in there. And so the next day when it was light again, yeah, I could tell it was really beautiful area. So your husband's name is Ivan,
Yes.
and you
And
have
we have
one.
one, she's now 7 months, just turned seven
Okay,
months. Our daughter is named Annalise.
Annalise. All right,
Yes.
very good. Yeah, we just had our first daughter in fall of 2020. So she's like 16 months already.
Well,
Um,
and
it's-
you have a couple sons. I forget how many,
yeah, we have
right?
three boys.
Three. Okay, great.
Had 3 boys, and now we have a girl, and so bringing extra beauty and sensitivity to our life, but she's also kind of uh, giving the boys a run for their money. So, so you personally grew up a part of a, obviously, like most of my listeners are going to be familiar with Anabaptism and the Anabaptist Church, conservative Anabaptist Church. Some people might think, some people listening, I don't think this will be the case for most, but some people might have MCUSA and Amish kind of all in the same. I don't know if people will know that all the varying types of Anabaptism, but you would have grown up in a fairly conservative Mennonite setting. Is that correct?
I would say fairly conservative. Yeah.
What are some of the things that set your conference? Were you a part of a conference, or is the Sheldon Church
No,
unaffiliated?
we were never
Yeah.
unaffiliated. Yeah, it's unaffiliated.
Okay. So what are some of the unique aspects of your church as far as belief and practice that might set you apart from some other Anabaptists? Well, before we were recording, you told me that the church you're going to now used to be beachy, so it has kind of a beachy flavor. Maybe I'll ask you, what is some of the differences from what you grew up with to what you're experiencing now?
Well, what I'm experiencing now, there is a lot more variety in dress,
Hmm.
and just maybe a lot more openness to education, to different ways of doing things. Whereas where I grew up, it's maybe partly being conservative Anabaptist and also partly just who we were, little
Hmm.
us in Rusk County, kind of in the middle of nowhere. I mean, maybe more, I don't know, not as polished, maybe. But
Not as polished as beachy or as others?
just as, when you come east, people have things more
Oh
put
yeah,
together.
yeah,
It feels like to me, we were kind of in the middle of nowhere and just kind of our little
yeah.
country church and kind of set in our ways, maybe to a certain extent. Or I would say we were a very welcoming church as far as like for visitors and stuff. But we just, had our ways of doing things, and this is how we did it. And and we, as far as dress, like if you're asking about dress, like we wore cape dresses and like the European style coverings. And we were just pretty traditional, like our church services were just pretty much the same. We'd have 3 songs in the morning, and then you have your devotional before Sunday school, and then you have your Sunday school, and then you come back from Sunday school and you have another song, and you have your sermon, and then you have another song to close, and you stand up for the closing prayer. And we had prayer several times, but it was the same every Sunday. Whereas now the church where I'm attending now, they actually mix it up a lot more, so you don't necessarily know what to expect exactly.
Interesting.
I mean, there's a basic order of the service, but there's a lot more maybe sharing time from the congregation, things like that. So
Yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. I'm curious if has the church that you grew up in, has it changed, or is it still kind of similar as far as church format? And even you mentioned something about the setting you're in now is maybe a little more open to education and stuff like that. What has the church you grew up in changed? Is that, and part of the reason I'm asking the question is, it seems like there's like some of the differences within conservative Anabaptist conferences are conference related, like they just have a different flavor. But it also seems like there's a change with younger generation, like there just is a little more opening up to education, or uh changing up the way you do a service. Would you
yeah,
say that, or is, yeah.
well, I think part of the thing with education, um, that's maybe partly just the area or the setting or the lifestyle that people have. Like in Rusk County, people just didn't really think about going on to college. They're farmers, if you had a purpose, and that's kind of a Mennonite thing too, a
Hmm.
conservative Mennonite thing. You just college isn't necessarily in the spectrum. Whereas Mountain View, I mean, Mountain View, there's a lot of young people that do go to college, a lot more than in my home area. But now, I mean, it's not like people are completely against it. Like my brother is now attending college, and my sister went to college to be a nurse.
Yeah.
So it's not like people are necessarily against education, but maybe they are a little bit more skeptical, I would say. And
Hmm.
also, um, maybe a little more, yeah, just a little more leery of outside influences, I would
Hmm.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I guess in your book you talk about yourself going to at least auditing some classes.
You're right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, and I actually am going to college now. I'm finishing up my communications degree here
Oh,
in the
okay.
spring, so that's exciting.
Okay. Yeah, no, that is cool. Very good. So yeah, maybe we'll dive in. I don't know if I could keep we could keep analyzing Anabaptist culture or dive into the book, which is essentially, is it fair to say that the book is a memoir of you processing some of the uniqueness of your upbringing as you began relating with someone outside of your church culture and setting that broke some stereotypes, or like,
Yeah,
is that kind of
definitely.
a
I would
good,
say,
yeah.
yeah, you put that very well.
Would you mind giving a rundown, at least for our audience, just kind of what is the book, and why should they read it?
So, as a young person, a younger person, I wasn't a teenager. I think I was like 24 maybe when I met
Okay.
Charlene. But I had led a very sheltered life for the most part, as far as not interacting very much with non-Christians or even non-Mennonites, very much.
Mhm.
So I met this little old woman. I was driving for a transit company, and she had regular weekly doctor appointments that she needed to go to. And I was very intrigued by her. We kind of hit it off right from the beginning. The first time I drove her, we just had this really interesting discussion. I really, really liked her, and I could tell she liked me, which maybe she was responding to my very genuine interest in her. She was
Mhm.
a quarter Ojibwe. She was. She called herself Indian, and she was.
Hmm.
But she was also part. She had I think maybe her mom was half French Canadian and half Ojibwe, and then her dad would have been like Dutch. Anyway,
Okay.
but she looked native. She had, yeah, she had the native look, and of course, I was very intrigued by that because I've always been fascinated for some reason from a child. I've always just thought Native Americans were just the coolest thing, and so in my mind, at that time, this just made her really interesting, and I wanted to get
Mhm.
to know her. She was a very unique, very sparky woman. She had a lot of interesting things to say. She was a good storyteller, and I really wanted to help her know Jesus. And so I reached out to her, and she was lonely. I would, even after I stopped driving for the transit company, I would go over to her place to visit, and eventually I started driving her separately. So there were a lot of chances for us to interact and get to know each other. And she really, I would say, opened my mind to life outside my very sheltered Anabaptist upbringing, and broke a
Mhm.
lot of my stereotypes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the do you mind talking about, or just mentioning at least some of the stereotypes that got broken? I know you one there's a few things. One of the first ones that that I remember you talking about in the book was that she considered herself a Christian, or she was familiar with God and open to God,
Yeah.
and it she didn't strike you. I forget how you worded it exactly, but something about it seemed to catch you off guard that she was Christian, and yet she obviously participated in some of the Ojibwe practices, and kind of blended some of her Indian culture as well.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it caught me off guard necessarily that she was a Christian. I don't know that that necessarily surprised me, but it was a real journey for me to take my own ideas of Christianity, which maybe weren't even so Mennonite as just, you read these little evangelical tracts that are like, there's 3 steps to salvation, you follow
Yeah.
these steps,
Yeah.
ask Jesus into your heart, and now you're a Christian. Um, or like even just hearing like stories of conversion, people, how their lives changed when they became a Christian. And so I was confused about Charlene. And I think it was a legitimate confusion because yes, she did claim and love Jesus, and she really did, and she had those basics, but there was also a lot of maybe gaps in her biblical knowledge and a lot of gaps in her practice. She didn't
Yeah.
necessarily live the kind of life I thought a Christian should be living.
Yeah.
And so there
Yeah.
was a lot of confusion, a lot of things for me to wade through with coming, and ultimately I came to a deeper understanding, I think, of what it means to be a Christian and what it means to be born again. And not that I have it all figured out now, but
Yeah.
I would say that
Yeah.
my understanding deepened and became less like, okay, it's just 3 steps.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
So that's interesting. In full transparency for our audience, I am about halfway through the book. I haven't actually finished it yet, but I've noticed that, or I wondered if you're going to process a little further what, like I could tell you're trying to make sure that she's saved. You have
mhm,
that encounter where you pull off to the side of the road and have a prayer later to
mhm.
discover that she was just kind of playing with you or something. Uh, or you said something about later you found out she was sarcastic. She was being sarcastic.
Yeah, I don't think she was playing with me when we prayed, but maybe, yeah, maybe she was a little just skeptical about the whole process,
The
or
whole yeah.
yeah, and yeah.
So
She
what?
was she was kind of skeptical about the born again people. I didn't
Oh,
find that
okay.
out
Yeah.
until later into our friendship, but she was a little bit skeptical about the whole born again idea.
Yeah. Hey, folks, I just wanted to take this time and say thank you for listening. It is fun for me to be able to sit down and interview people, but I really hope that these interviews and these podcast episodes are helpful to you in your journey as you sort through issues and try to reconcile your human experiences with God and what He says through His Word. I would love to hear feedback from you. Obviously, every episode has an email address in the description. So if you want to shoot me an email message, let me know what you're thinking, what has stood out to you, whether positive or negative. Another really helpful way is to rate and review it on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. If it's on iTunes, I know you have the capability of rating it as well as leaving a review. I would love to hear whether it's good or negative feedback. But even if all you can do is give a thumbs up or a star rating, go ahead and do that. Whether it's 1 star or 5 stars, a thumbs up or thumbs down, that helps me know kind of where you guys are at and how it's landing on you guys and whether or not these are being helpful and meaningful for you. It is my desire to facilitate a safe place for processing through some fairly deep issues in life. And I hope that it's been that for you. I'd love to hear what your experience has been like with Unfeigned Christianity podcast. Thanks for taking the time to give a response. Thanks for taking the time to listen. It is a privilege to be able to provide these each week for you all. What are some other stereotypes, or what are other ways that your relationship with Charlene made you think more broadly about relationships and about Christian the Christian journey?
Well, one thing, you brought up stereotypes. Like, I think as a conservative Anabaptist or conservative Mennonite, maybe I had some stereotypes about who my family was and who other families were. Like, maybe we did things, we were a close, and we were a close family, and it was wonderful. But maybe almost in a way that devalued other people's families or others.
Hmm.
Maybe imperfect as they are, maybe the love that other families have for each other, or um, the relationships or the value of what they have. That's very easy to do when you interact with someone from a different background. It's like, oh, this is how we do it, this is the best way, and maybe almost devalue what they have to offer, and maybe some of the things about what you do or the things, your relationships or what you experience, are better, but they also have things that are valuable. And I think I learned to recognize that you don't have to like, even though your family's different, even though you have all these problems that I'm not used to, like divorce and maybe drugs or,
Mm.
um, family squabbles, just
Hmm.
multitudes of people problems. Like what you have is still, you still have something valuable, and I see that. I see what you have that's good,
Yeah.
and learning to do that, learning
Yeah.
that's there, and also I think learning that I'm not any different.
Hmm.
You and I may be from very different backgrounds, and there are very real differences between us, but we can still, on a very human level, there's ways that I'm like you, that and we can relate on those levels.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I think the subtitle of your book is, oh, that's not the subtitle is Unlikely Friends with a Life-Changing Bond. I was I was thinking it was something along it was Unlikely Friends, but maybe it's just something you talk about either in the book, or I was listening to another podcast you were on, so maybe I got it from that. But just the surprise or the unlikely place of learning. Like you, as you said at the beginning, you went in to lead her to Jesus, and
Mhm.
then to discover that like she actually taught you something about life, about God, and
She taught me a lot about God, a lot about faith, a lot about simple faith. Um,
hmm,
I
amen.
learned so much from her about just having a simple, beautiful faith in Jesus, and how powerful that is.
Yeah, yeah. Say more about that.
Well, like she was I remember when she told me, and this was early in our friendship, and it was one of the things that I was like, well, I don't know if you're a Christian or not because you have this beautiful faith, but yet, you don't have all your beliefs right the way I think they should
Mm,
be.
mm,
And I remember that was earlier in our friendship when she was just telling me about the woman who washed Jesus' feet, and she said, um, you know, can you imagine? She was just so full and of love for Jesus. She said, I'm not even worthy to kiss his big toe. And
yeah,
that was the kind of simple love and faith
mm,
that she had that was very beautiful to see.
yeah, yeah. It's reminded me a little bit, or some of the stuff that you've said um, a few years ago. This was back one of the first times, one of the first years we were here in LA. We would often go to the Union Rescue Mission, which was a Christian mission for homeless people in downtown LA. And we'd often go there and sing, do some singing, maybe hand out tracts, help feed food. They twice a day they fed people through there. Later on, we eventually did some like foot spas for people, washing people's feet. But one of the first times we were there, I remember going in and looking around. It was a lot of people, a lot of men. They're divided, male and female, as far as kind of the behind the scenes, like where you gather and hang out. And so on the male side, was looking around, it's a bunch of guys that look like they're on drugs or they're not very clean. Like obviously they've been living on the streets. And so I come in as a clean, put together white guy. Most of those people were either Latino or black, or some of them were, but not all of them were white. And I just very much had this mindset that I'm going to tell people about heaven or tell people about God. And I remember giving a track and starting a conversation with this one guy who, in 15 minutes, profoundly changed my perspective of God, and in a good way. Like he showed me more of God, and had a love for Jesus that I didn't even have, and a trust in Jesus, and challenged me in my own walk with God. And I left there kind of confused, because it's like, why is he in this homeless shelter? Especially because part of my mindset was that if I'm truly following God, then I will be always taken care of, and I won't ever face hard economic circumstances. And So yeah, I've thought about that event different times as I read or as I listen to you talk, just the unlikely places that we discover more about God.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one time Char said, if I go over and turn on the water at the kitchen sink, God allows me to do that. She had
Hmm.
this, she really did have it. And I'm like, wow, I guess I thought I believed in the sovereignty of God, but you really believe in the sovereignty of God. I
Yeah,
never once thought about, okay, only because of God's grace can I go turn on the water at the kitchen sink. So,
yeah,
so yeah, that was, to me, that was pretty profound in a
yeah,
very down to earth way, which is how Char was. She was very profound in a very down to earth way.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Hey, friends, I have a little surprise for you. If you've been enjoying this conversation between Luci and I about her book, Turtle Heart, I am going to be giving away 2 copies, 2 free copies. There is going to be a link in the description of this podcast episode. Just click on that link. It'll take you to a page where you enter your email, and the first 2 people to enter their email will be the winners of this giveaway. So if you would like your own copy of Turtle Heart, you have not read it yet, and you'd like to get it for free, just go ahead and click the link in the description or visit www.asherwhitmer.com/turtle heart and enter your email. And the first 2 to enter will receive a free copy of Luci's book. There's 2 areas that I'd like to talk about, but I don't want to take too much time here. I'm trying to figure out which one would be best, at least to start with. But what are some ways, like, as you look back on that experience and you're living in a new area? I'm assuming you're still, what, 2-3 years into Maryland, or have you been there for a while? No.
No, I've lived here as long as we're married, so it's been a little
Okay.
over 2 years.
Yeah. And so it's a new church setting, are you largely interacting with Anabaptist people, or you live
Yeah,
in the country?
I live in the country. There's actually a lot more Anabaptists. I mean, I shouldn't say there's I don't know, maybe it's the place where I live, but right here in Pleasant Valley, there's a lot of New Order Amish and a lot of Mennonites. Like
Oh, okay.
that's just
Yeah.
there's probably a bigger percentage of the population, maybe, or at least right here in Pleasant Valley, than back home where I grew up in Rusk County.
Yeah.
So in a way, and I had pretty deep roots in the community there, with Mennonites, yes, but also
Yeah.
with non-Mennonites. I had friendships. I had a variety of friendships there, and so here it feels like I really haven't got very far outside of my church and a few neighbors.
Mhm.
Um, but
Mm.
but yeah, so largely at this point, mostly interacting with Anabaptists, at least
Yeah.
in personally,
Yeah.
with the new friends that I've made.
How have, like, obviously your relationship with Charlene has changed the way you think about and relate with people who are like Charlene, who come from that background, sorry, who come from a different background even than your own, whether that's
Mm.
exactly like Charlene's or not. How has your relationship with Charlene, how does that impact the setting you live in now? Like, are there things that you think about, or you intentionally do now to, I I haven't thought through this question real thoroughly, so I'm trying to articulate what I'm trying to get at, but like, whether that's the way you relate to your neighbors, or whether that's even just people within the Anabaptist community, has your experience with Charlene changed the way you relate to other Anabaptists?
That's a good question. I have never thought about that before. Um, there was a time, like right after I knew Charlene, and I felt like, and I was, and part of the story is, maybe I don't know how much. Part of the story that Part of my journey with Charlene was confusion over my sexuality, and just confusion. Like, I think as a result of knowing her, like, I felt like my mind was really broadened, and I learned a lot of big things, and I didn't really feel Mennonite anymore. I felt way bigger than Mennonites, and I didn't really feel like I could fit into the Anabaptists.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that happened like after I knew her. And I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I'm pretty authentically, deeply Mennonite. It's just kind of that's the way
Yeah.
I grew up, and so this is where I was born. And even if I like, even if I like thinking outside the box, the general way I think is definitely very Mennonite.
Hmm.
Um, and so I don't, I've gotten to, realize that, yeah, we're just people. No, and yes, I do fit in, and yeah, there's a wide variety. They're not just like, not just like my home church either. Like there's a lot of other people that may feel like I do that are within the Anabaptists. Um,
Hmm.
so but I would say for a while after I knew Charlene, like knowing her made me feel like I didn't fit in. And I would say that
Hmm.
faded now with time. But
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was the sexuality part that you touch on in the book. And that again, I have not read the end of the story or the whole story, so I'm not sure what all you process. But what I've gathered so far is you're slowly waking up. There were different things early on in your relationship that made you wonder if it was interesting reading it. I knew you had written some articles about same-sex attraction,
mhm,
and so I knew that this story must involve that. And so maybe I was looking
mhm,
for it a little bit, but it was interesting. There were things that were happening that as a reader, I was like, this lady's gay or this lady's lesbian.
mhm,
And yet in your writing, you didn't acknowledge that yet. Um, and then you started talking about, the peck on the lips and asking you to sleep in her bed with her and different things that eventually started you began processing, like, is this lady gay? Did she, when she says she loves you, is it meaning more than just kind of friendship, I love you sort of thing? um what was that process like for you, and do you mind talking about some of the struggles that it maybe led you to sort through?
well, like a lot of the little clues that I was careful to put in the book, um, I didn't catch on to it at all at the time because that was not in my mind. That was not from my background.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, and I think even, yeah, like that was like maybe some of the stuff or the incidents or the way things that would have been, yeah, very obvious, like I didn't actually completely process till in retrospect afterwards, like even after, after she
Hmm.
passed away and I was writing our story. But
Hmm.
can you just rephrase your question again, because I
Yeah.
feel like I kind of lost where I was going with that. Can you say it
Yeah.
again so I can think about it? But
Yeah, absolutely. My question was, what was that like for you to kind of awaken to the fact that this lady's trying to have a, or is it, again, I don't know, is she trying to have a same-sex relationship with you, or is it just kind of her desires bubbling out? Like, was she intentionally trying to pursue that with you? I I don't want
I
to
would say
don't
she,
give away too much of the story, but
yeah,
yeah.
no, I would say she was, and I don't know that I completely caught onto that until even like I was never quite sure.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I completely caught onto it till even after, but I'm pretty sure she was initially. And then she was very lonely though.
Hmm.
I know
Hmm.
she was initially. Like she thought, okay, I'm lesbian. She thought I was as well. I'm pretty,
Okay.
and yeah, she was trying to start a relationship, like that kind of a relationship initially, because yeah, and I don't want to go on into details of the story, so I'll let readers read it for themselves.
Yeah.
But I know she did have that in her mind initially, but she was also just lonely. Like she just,
Yeah.
whether, it didn't have to be a lesbian relationship. She was very hungry for a friendship. And so
Hmm.
that I think was somewhat confusing to me because I wanted to meet her emotional needs. And then I was very confused about, oh, is this wrong? Because you're lesbian. And so is this the wrong kind of a relationship?
Yeah.
That was very confusing for me to try to
Yeah.
read through.
Yeah. And there's several questions I want to ask. but I want to be careful of your time. The first one maybe is I just lost my first one. The second
That happens to me.
oh, what was it? Hey, listeners, I wanted to take a moment and talk to you about the Unfeigned Christianity membership program. If you've been enjoying this conversation between Luci and I about her book, Turtle Heart, you may be interested in learning about the Unfeigned Christianity membership program. As a part of the membership program, you receive expanded versions of podcast interviews such as this. Another thing that members get is 2 deep dive essays a month that look at something Christians are wrestling through right now. So, for instance, deconstruction has been something that many are talking about and processing. And so, in a few days, I'm going to be releasing a deep dive essay that looks at, is deconstruction destructive, and kind of wrestling through what leads people to deconstruct, and is it right or wrong to deconstruct, and how can we deconstruct in a way that actually leads to something better than just kind of negativity, or even another posture towards it is just to avoid it, like, no, any deconstruction is bad. And so that's an example of a essay that's coming up. We have a lot of essays already published that you'll receive access to, such as, is it wrong for Christians to masturbate, thinking through the Black Lives Matter movement, what Ravi's fall tells us about how we handle brokenness in the church, and many more types of deep dive essays. If this sounds like something you're interested in, visit www.asherwhitmer.com/member and become a member today. It's as cheap as $10 a month. That gives you access, again, to expanded podcast episodes as well as deep dive essays twice a month and everything that's in the archives. Again, the address is www.asherwhitmer.com/member. You were talking about the the challenge of, like, do I continue in a relationship with this person now that I know she's lesbian? So that's one question. The second one, what is, did it cause you to struggle? You mentioned, you referenced your own struggle with sexuality. Did that struggle come because of the fact that she thought you were lesbian, and then you, like, processing, like, what's that all about? Or
So, well, first of all, like I never considered giving up a friendship, like because she was lesbian.
mm,
Like I was going to be her friend. Like that wasn't a
mm,
question in my
mm,
mind. It was more, it was more like, what do I do with this? How do I relate to you in a
mm,
way that's pure? Because now I don't know how to act,
yeah,
and I don't know if my actions are right, because like I never worry, if it's another girl, hey, it's all girls, no big deal.
yeah,
We're us, and now all of a sudden I need to start relating to you in a I mean, I need okay, so if you're lesbian, and does that mean you're like a guy, and how do I relate to someone that I can't just be a girl with?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um and like then starting to yeah, like if she thought like, am I really, maybe I'm lesbian, like that was completely because like I love you so much, like I loved her so much, like so
Mm,
deeply, in a way that I had
mhm,
never had a friendship with anybody else before, and probably never will again. But now that I'm married, I can look at it much more realistically. But I was very, very sheltered and very I never had sex. I had crushes on guys, but
mhm.
I didn't know how to process like who I was. And like, if I have these feelings for you, does that make, does that make me lesbian?
Oh, okay.
And, um,
So it
and so that was,
was, sorry,
go
go ahead and
ahead.
finish.
Yeah. So it was definitely part of that. Yeah, it's something I talk about in the book. I don't know if I go into a lot of, because some of that even happened after she passed away, where I was like,
Hmm.
um, now where am I? Like I feel so different than everybody else.
Yeah.
And part of that was because of our relationship, and the deep places that I went with her, that I didn't then know what to do with afterwards.
Hmm. Mhm. Yeah. So it was more your own affection for her that made you wonder about who you are, not just the
Yeah.
fact that she thought that you were the kind of person she could have a relationship with.
No,
Yeah.
that made me th well, that made me mad at first, like, when I thought, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're wondering if you," that made me mad at first. That was my first initial
Yeah.
thing, because that had never entered my mind, and I didn't wanna
Yeah.
be associated or thought of as a gay person. But
Yeah.
then after I got over, that first flush of emotion, yeah, there was just definitely, we loved each other very deeply. We had a very
Mm,
deep emotional connection. And we also had a lot of friction, a lot of, yeah, there was a lot of friction in our relationship as well. It was a very,
yeah,
maybe in some ways draining, maybe,
yeah, yeah,
in some ways fulfilling,
yeah,
but, but, but it was a confusing just trying to wade through what my emotions to her were and if they were right, because now
yeah,
I didn't know how to act anymore,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. Well, thank you, Lucy, for sharing and for honoring Charlene's life with this book. Did she ever? You waited to write it until she passed away, or did she know
Yeah,
you were writing?
she knew. I talked to her about it,
Yeah,
and she knew I was going to write a book about her. It was a book about her, and it ended up it was going to be a book about us and a lot about her, and it ended up being a book about us and a lot about me. And that's not
yeah,
because I'm like, oh, I want to write about me and not Shirley. It's because I can only write from my perspective. I
yeah,
can't write from her
yeah,
perspective. It's just so I wrote
yeah,
the story that I knew and the story I experienced, and
yeah,
it tells the story of our friendship.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. It's very good. I highly recommend it. I it's an easy read. It's a memoir. It's stories, so it's you do well at weaving in the processing and the conflict embedded within a story, and those are some of the best ways to help the rest of us process life as well. So, where can people find it if they want to go get it for themselves?
So you can get it online at Amazon or Barnes and Noble online. Um, and maybe a few local bookstores. It's not necessarily in a lot of bookstores, but you can also order it directly from me if you want to take the trouble to do that. But my website is lucindajkinsinger.com.
LucindaJKinsinger.com. Yeah,
That's right.
and that's I definitely recommend subscribing to Lucy's blog as well. I have followed her, excuse me, off and on for the. I mean, I follow your blog. I don't read every blog post, but since I think the first time you reached out to me, so 6 or 7 years probably, and you do really well at tackling the ones that I read are when you're tackling like issues of that are challenging to Christians that are especially this sort of thing where it might be stepping out of our box, our stereotypes. You blog about many different things, and so yeah, people can definitely go check Lucy out on her blog, Lucinda J. Kinsinger. If I can get
That's right.
the author.com. Thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, it was great to be here. I really enjoyed it.